You're listening to the Renegade Blitz, the best podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at RBlitzPod, and at Blitz Videos. Read articles on RenegadeBlitz.com, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app.
And welcome back to the Renegade Blitz podcast. I'm Polk with Chris Ward and Brandon Walker. Back with you for our preview podcast of Steelers versus Bears coming up on Monday Night Football. And the big story for the Steelers is they traded Melvin Ingram to the Kansas City Chiefs. It was a long rumor for at least the last 2 weeks with that report, and now he was traded for a 6th-round pick. And guys, I liked Melvin Ingram in week 1 with his I still think it was a pass rush masterclass against the Bills. I'm still going to maintain that, even though he's off the team. It's a shame that it went down like that, but it is what it is in this league.
Well, if he's not a happy player, he needs got to go. I think you said you have a Taco Charlton now. You have Highsmith, and you got DJ Watts. I think he was just an insurance guy, just in case that Highsmith wasn't going to be up to speed and wasn't be able to perform the way he needed to.
Yeah, it was kind of, he was doing well there in the beginning. I thought, wow, the Steelers have 3, solid edge rushers. TJ Watt, all pro player. And then you got Alex Highsmith and then Melvin Ingram. And then just kind of once Watt and Highsmith got healthy, Ingram's playing time went down and just he played 17 snaps against the Seahawks, and they just he wants out. He wants. Dede Krokobala reported that he thought he was better than Highsmith. I thought that was interesting. And obviously, a couple days later, they traded him to the Chiefs for a 6th-round pick. And then Keith Butler had an interesting comment today on Ingram where he said, "I think all of us think we are better than we are. We have to suffer reality sometimes." So I thought that was interesting. It's kind of like a nice way of Keith Butler saying that Ingram.
You ain't all that.
I mean, hey, and Tomlin brought out the old "we want volunteers, not hostages," and you haven't heard that in a few years. Remember the life and times of the Le'Veon Bell situation. So, yeah, when that came out, I was like, ooh, this guy really messed up, or he really wasn't happy. I think they could have used I guess with TJ Watt's affinity of going all out and then occasionally taking a breather, I thought that, maybe it's a 4th outside linebacker. It couldn't hurt, but yeah. And again, that's just how it is.
How do you think that's going to fit in with the Chiefs defense, though?
Well, from what I've heard with that, that's going to kick Chris Jones inside. So they'll get him back at defensive tackle, and they'll allow Frank Clark to be out there on one of the ends. But they run a 4-3 out there, and if I recall correctly, unless they're going to switch him down the D end, it's just I think outside linebackers in some situations in a 4-3, they're more into pass rushing situations, but I'm not exactly sure what the Chiefs defense really entails. We'll get more information about that whenever we see them in a few weeks. And of course, Melvin Ingram's going to be a big talk about that and his impact in the Chiefs defense since that trade. So stay tuned, folks.
And they play each other week 16 in Kansas City. So there's
going to be enough tape, and whoever we have as the guest will certainly have more information about that.
Yeah, I don't know why some Steelers fans were saying Colbert could have got something better. I thought a 6th-round pick at that point is really all you could get for a player that's unhappy with where he's at. He's 32, but he's not Von Miller.
He had some Pro Bowls. I guess they wanted to say I seen some people say 6th-round pick. I'm middle of the season, a guy that was brought in as a rotational piece. I'd be happy with just about anything. I thought he was going to be cut material on the previous podcast, him and Ebron, but Ebron, of course, survived the trade deadline. So,
yeah, he's the number 3 outside linebacker. He's he's not even close to what Von Miller's status is.
Yeah, Von Miller is only going to have a Hall of Fame jacket, but I'm sorry. We'll get to the Hall of Fame debate later on. So stay tuned.
Yeah, we talked about one certain former Bears special teamer, and you'll hear more about it with our interview with our next guest. And we welcome on Zack Pearson. He covers the Bears for BearReport.com as part of 24/7 Sports. Zack, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I'm looking forward to it.
And right now, the Steelers and the Bears are heading in different directions as of late. The Steelers are on a 3-game winning streak, and the Bears have lost their last 3 games. The Bears have been outscored 95-39 in those 3 games. However, 2 of those losses came to NFC powers, the Green Bay Packers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What's the overall feeling in Chicago with Justin Fields now at quarterback?
Yeah, so the rest of the way, the only thing that matters here in Chicago is Justin Fields and his development. That's the biggest thing moving forward, no matter who is the coach next year. I'm like 90% sure it won't be Matt Nagy, but, there's a chance he could save his job. But moving forward, it's all about Justin Fields. And, you mentioned that they've lost 3 straight, and 2 of those have been to, the Green Bay Packers and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were in the NFC Championship game last year and, are in contention to return this year. But the third one to the San Francisco 49ers was kind of the one where you're like, okay, there's some problems going on here overall with this team. The defense has let them down the last 3 games. The offense just isn't moving the ball. But in this past week against the 49ers, Justin Fields actually looked pretty good. It just felt like the rest of the team let him down. So, the mood is kind of, the Bears, it doesn't matter what they do, win or lose, as long as Justin Fields plays good, everything's kind of fine. And I think a lot of Bears fans are starting to accept that.
And with Matt Nagy, of course, that's the one thing that's kind of been like I guess everybody's really been putting that towards, okay, that's the problem with the Bears, because when you think back, Trubisky was in trade talks with the Washington football team for his preseason, which he looked pretty good. And away from Matt Nagy calling the plays last week due to COVID-19, that's when Justin Fields had his, pseudo breakout game. So, and you mentioned that the possibility that Matt Nagy's not there, just how has it changed with him? Because it's been a roller coaster with them ever since, really, the defense was the focal point with Khalil Mack coming into Chicago.
Yeah, it's been a big change. I think when Nagy arrived on the scene in 2018, everything was good. There was no tape on him. He could kind of do a lot of things he wanted to do in his scheme. And we saw that in Green Bay. Even though they lost week 1 in Green Bay that season, it felt like, okay, the Bears have a new offense. We're finally, our entire franchise's existence has been based on defense and running the ball, but now we finally have an offense that throws the football. But about halfway through that 2018 season, after they had a couple blowouts against like the Bills and a couple other, teams that were not good that year, things changed and the offense kind of started to struggle. They only put up like 13 points in their wild card game. And then after that, it just went downhill with Matt Nagy and his scheme. They were not good. They finished 10th in points in 2018, but we have to note the defense scored, I think, like 6 touchdowns of their own, which counts towards that. And then they had, a godly amount of takeaways, like over 30 that set up their offense in great field position. After that, the Bears in 2019, 2020 have finished in the bottom 10 in points per game. They've been bad yards per game. Yards per play has been awful. So it's just with Matt Nagy, it's just gone downhill and it's soured really quickly. I think the scheme is not working. And, you look at Matt Nagy and he's a disciple of Andy Reid. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, man, you're getting Andy Reid. Like, you're getting that scheme. That's not the case at all. Matt Nagy's scheme's a little different. It's like a branch off of the Andy Reid tree. But it's just not working. They just, even with a quarterback who is accurate down the field, for whatever reason, they cannot throw the football down the field. And it's gotten really sour here in Chicago. And I'd say the majority of fans are ready to kind of move on to a new era here.
Okay, and just one question. What type of coach would you want and do you think they would need for Justin Fields to be successful moving forward? Because it's obviously not going to be Matt Nagy.
Yeah, I think you need to get a guy that's offensive minded that, can develop a quarterback. I think that's the biggest problem is Matt Nagy didn't develop Mitch Trubisky, and Matt Nagy got Nick Foles here, and that didn't work out. They were butting heads. You need to get someone who can develop Justin Fields, an offensive mind. I look at kind of someone similar to Kyle Shanahan or Matt LaFleur. I haven't done my research on potential candidates yet. I know Dable in Buffalo is a name that's been thrown out there a lot. Kellen Moore, Byron Leftwich. I would probably lean those three that way. Guys that have experience developing the quarterbacks and have proven track records. It's, in terms of the scheme, I don't know what best fits Justin Fields just yet because we just haven't seen what he can really do because it's just kind of been a mess offensively here in Chicago.
So what about Ryan Pace? I know he's on the hot seat too because he's been through 3 coaches now?
Yeah.
So you can't hire a fourth.
Yeah. So this was his second coach. This is his second coach. The first one, John Fox, was kind of, management saying, here, you have to take John Fox this year. But even, with the 2 coaches, getting a third coach is a big responsibility. And the thing with Ryan Pace is, he's got that one mistake looming over him. That one, 2017 NFL draft, you trade up and you take Trubisky with Mahomes there. And that's not a knock on Mitch. I think it's just bad luck. You have a Hall of Famer, and then you have Deshaun Watson, who up until, whatever his situation is right now, was on pace for, being a top 10 quarterback right now in the league, top 5, one of the best. And who knows where his career would have gone and can still go. But yeah, I think Ryan Pace, see, the problem is here in Chicago, we've asked multiple times, what is the contract situation? Are the 2 lined up? Are they connected like you think they would be? And the Bears just refuse to answer the question. They refuse to answer it. So I don't know. I think Ryan Pace is on the hot seat too. If I think one of them stayed, I think they'd give Pace the extra shot over Nagy.
Let's focus on at least this year with Fields so far. It's a 3-7 touchdown interception ratio, 59.5% completion percentage. And he had a pretty good game last week. So, and also, of course, 103 yards rushing and that dazzling rushing touchdown in which he reversed field almost, not to really sound sacrilegious, like a certain Detroit running back in history. But what's been the assessment of Fields' play so far, and what do you think you'll see out of him this Monday against the Steelers?
Yeah, he's had to go up against some really good defenses. Cleveland's a really good defense. Pittsburgh's another really good defense that has pass rushers. I don't think his offensive line has helped him out a lot. Their best offensive lineman is 39-year-old Jason Peters, and that's a guy they signed when he was literally in a stream fishing in August and didn't think he'd be playing in the NFL again. So his offensive line hasn't done him any favors. It's really tough to get a true assessment on him right now, just because you take that one Cleveland game, he had no chance back there. He was just wrecked all game long. And then you look at the games he came in against Cincinnati. He made a bad rookie mistake throwing, an easy interception to the linebacker. The linebacker dropped in coverage. He didn't read it well. The most of his mistakes, though, have come, blindside sacks. He's fumbling or tipped passes off his wide receiver's hands. His last interception was pretty much a Hail Mary last-ditch effort in the game against San Francisco, and Darnell Mooney had his hand on the ball, just didn't come down with it. So it's kind of hard to assess him because, what they're trying to do right now, I don't think is playing to his strengths. They're trying to do what they can to win and save their jobs, which, you can still do that if you play to your quarterback's strengths. And he just hasn't been helped out by the offensive line or receivers. I think the Bears made a big mistake not giving him first-team reps in training camp. I was there. I counted legit 5 first-team reps, 7-on-7, 11-on-11 with the first team. And that's it. That is incredible to me, especially when you're Matt Nagy and you have to save your job this year. I don't care if you knew Andy Dalton was starting week 1. You had to give your quarterback reps. And Justin Fields said it today. He said, because he's got a connection with, former Steelers tight end Jesse James. They were on fire in the preseason. And someone asked him, why he thought he's got that connection with James. And he said, we got the reps on the second team in training camp. And everyone's kind of like, well, I wonder what would have happened if he got the reps now with Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney and guys like that. So If I had to make an assessment with Justin Fields, I think there's a very high ceiling. I think he's got the highest ceiling of anyone not named Trevor Lawrence in this class. Mac Jones is playing really well. I think he's in a good situation. I don't think his ceiling is high. I think, and I think that's fine. I think Justin Fields has really high ceiling, but he also has, a floor that if not developed right here in this next 2 years, he could bust big time. But it's really tough to assess it at this moment. I think Pittsburgh will be a really good challenge for him, especially on the road. Tough environment, good defense, legit pass rushers. And it's another Hall of Fame quarterback he's going up against. He's going the last 4 weeks. He's going up against 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks: Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and now Ben Roethlisberger.
And with David Montgomery currently on injured reserve, running back Khalil Herbert has really been impressive for the Bears, rushing for at least 72 yards rushing in the last 4 games. What kind of dimension does Herbert give the Bears rushing attack?
Yeah, so I think there's a chance David Montgomery might be back for this game. So I'll say that because I think he practiced today. He has a chance to get off IR. Still, even if Montgomery plays, Herbert's going to get his reps. And, when Montgomery went down against the Lions week 4, he was, Montgomery was on a really good pace. I think he had like 369 rushing yards left early in that game. Herbert took over and split time with Damian Williams, and Herbert outshined the veteran Williams. Good vision. He falls forward when he's hit. He's tough to break down. He's kind of quick. And I think, I joke with some people here, in Chicago. I think him and Khalil Herbert playing at Kansas for 3 years helped the Bears get a steal in the draft because no one saw him play at Kansas. All the tape is on Virginia Tech. And rightfully so. Kansas is not very good at football. So, a lot of people didn't know what they were going to get in Herbert, but man, he's quick, he's fast. He's not like indecisive behind the line of scrimmage. He picks his hole, follows his blocks, and then when he gets in that open field, he can kind of take off. But he's been fantastic, and I think him and Montgomery, that 1-2 punch they have, and then when Damian Williams gets back, their backfield's going to be even better.
Okay, the Bears' top 3 receivers are free agent to be Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, and Marquise Godwin. And at tight end, they got a young guy, Cole Kmet, and former Steeler, Jesse James. Robinson is averaging 33 yards receiving per game and just had 1 touchdown all season. Not ideal when you're going to go into free agency. You're playing on the franchise there. But the rookie, he's a second-year player. I'm sorry. Mooney has had a really good start to the season. 33 catches for 409 yards. What's been going on with Robinson? How do you think he's gonna? Do you think he's gonna come back next season and give it another go? And how do you think Jesse James is going off in the Bears locker room with leadership and his veteran presence?
Yeah, with Robinson, I'd say 99% gone. He was very unhappy that he got the tag on this year. And they just couldn't come to an agreement at all in the past 2 seasons. He wanted a lot of money. I think he wanted anywhere like 18 to 19 mil on average per year. The Bears valued him at like 15 to 16 mil per year. And it just never worked out. And it's just kind of a mystery here why he hasn't gotten going. I would point to lack of, reps with Justin Fields in the offseason. They didn't get much. Robinson didn't show up for the OTAs. He didn't play in the preseason with Fields. So there's just not the chemistry there. And it might be a little bit schemed too. I think Robinson and Fields haven't been able to connect. And also, they're targeting Darnell Mooney down the field a lot more. They're using guys like Demir Bird and Marquise Goodwin a little on short routes. And for whatever reason, Robinson just hasn't been able to get going. If James is the kind of the surprising one to me. He was a guy that was picked up, late in the offseason, didn't have any like OTAs or minicamp work. And right away, he was making plays in training camp. Like, legit, I think he had a touchdown in like 3 of his first 4 practices or something like that. That's just being a veteran. And, he's established that chemistry with Justin Fields. In terms of the locker room, the tight end position has been a weird one for the Bears. They have Jimmy Graham. He's only got 1 reception and like 4 targets all year. They're hoping Cole Kmet breaks out. Hasn't happened yet so far. And James has arguably been one of their better tight ends. So I think getting that veteran presence in there to help out with the rookie quarterback helped. Wish I could kind of say the same for Allen Robinson. It's just kind of a mystery of why he's not producing right now.
And now let's talk about the Bears' offensive line. They drafted Tevin Jenkins, who was really a big pick in terms of what, at least in terms of what people wanted in terms with the offensive line. But of course, he's injured, and they brought in Jason Peters, who's 39 years old and has run around the league with notably the Bills and the Eagles. And of course, you have Cody Whitehair, Sam Muspear, James Daniels, and Larry Brown. What's been up with the Bears' offensive line? It's 26 sacks on Justin Fields so far this season. Was Jenkins going to be a huge part in at least shielding some of those sack totals? And how do you think they'll go against Cameron Hayward and TJ Watt?
I'm worried about that matchup. I am very worried about Pittsburgh's pass rush. The Bears haven't fared well against good pass rushes. Cleveland lit them up. Tampa Bay lit them up. They just, Nick Bosa had a big game last week against the Bears. And a lot of the pressure is coming, from the inside. And Jason Peters has been fine on that left side, the blind side. But on the right, they were going into the year hoping that it was Tevin Jenkins and it was Jermaine Ifedi. Ifedi's hurt. He wasn't very good when he was in anyway. So they've had to go to Elijah Wilkinson. They've had to go to Larry Borum. They've had to go to Alex Bars. They've had to go to a 7th round pick in Latavius Simmons. Nothing's really worked out on the right side. Up the middle, Sam Musfer has been not very good. And that's kind of alarming because last season and the year he took over as a center. 6 games, he was fantastic. He was probably the best offensive lineman in that stretch. Just hasn't converted over this year. And I think if Pittsburgh wants to get to the quarterback, Jason Peters at 39 is still pretty good. I'd give the advantage to the Steelers pass rush, but I think it's going to be a little more difficult to get around Peters. If I'm the Steelers, I'm giving the Bears different looks on blitzes. I'm bringing the pressure up the middle, and I'm challenging Sam Musser to make the right call. When you watch and break down the film, Cody Whitehair and James Daniels on the guards, they've held up pretty well. It's just been Sam Musser for not picking up that extra blocker, picking up the right blocker, and it's getting driven back. I mean, there's a play where Justin Fields rolled out, he spun, and then had 15-yard gain. If you watch that play, though, he had to do that because Nick Bosa just absolutely annihilated Mustapher and just drove him back, forcing Fields to kind of roll out. So I don't think it's going to go well for the Bears offensive line. I wouldn't be surprised if Jason Peters holds up, and he's the only one that holds up, but they got problems up the middle. They got problems on that right side. And that's an area Pittsburgh's probably going to at least try to expose.
And moving to the defensive side of the ball, the Bears have an impressive pass rush with all-pro outside linebacker Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn. How do you think the Bears match up with the young Steelers offensive line? And will Mack be good to go for Monday night as he missed the game against the 49ers with a foot injury?
Yeah, right now I don't think Mack will play. He'd have to practice by tomorrow, or at least be out there, maybe in limited fashion, or on Saturday. Robert Quinn has been really good, but last week he was going up against Trent Williams, which is one of the best tackles in football. I think if the Bears are going to win this game, from what I've seen from the Steelers, is Big Ben's not the Big Ben that we know from 10 years ago. He doesn't want to get hit. He doesn't want to roll out. He doesn't want, and I don't blame him. I mean, he's an older quarterback. He kind of knows his limitations. He's going to get the ball out quick. If the Bears are going to win this game, they got to get Robert Quinn and second-year pass rusher Travis Gibson going. They did not get going. They had 0 quarterback hits, I think 0 pressure, 0 sacks against the 49ers. They didn't touch Tom Brady the week before. They've really struggled with their pass rush the last couple games. They have to get to Big Ben. They have to knock him down, hit him a couple times. Maybe force him to go in a different spot he doesn't want to go to. And they're going to get pressure up the middle as well. Eddie Goldman returned this year. He hasn't been the same. Akeem Hicks is pretty much playing on one ankle. He's a guy that I think is one of the more underrated defensive linemen in the league when fully healthy. But right now, I mean, he's out there. He's giving it his all. He's producing on literally one ankle. And they need more than that. Bilal Nichols hasn't been very good for them. Mario Edwards has had a couple, terrible penalties. If they don't get pressure on Big Ben, I think it's a wrap. I think you're going to see the same results the past 2 weeks.
All right. And your 3-4 scream, you got one of the best middle linebackers in football in Roquan Smith, but you got a good veteran in Alec Overtree. How do you think they're doing this year, and how do you think they're going to match up against Najee Harris?
Yeah, I mean, Roquan Smith, outside of that game last week, he was really quiet. He kind of struggled. he's been fantastic. And last year, I think he was snubbed from All-Pro. Fred Wagner, really good. I'm blanking on the guy up in Seattle, really good as well. They probably deserved it. But Roquan Smith, man, he was fantastic last year. I think he had 18 tackles for loss. He had like 120 something tackles. The only player to do that this last year. I think he had like 3 or 4 sacks, interception. He kind of took it personally too. He says, he doesn't really take it personally. He definitely took it personally because he's come out on fire this year. He's been by far probably their best player on defense. And that's with the defense with Khalil Mack and the defense with Eddie Goldman, Akeem Hicks, Eddie Jackson. He's been fantastic. I think Najee Harris is going to be a little bit of a challenge for him. He's held up well against running backs in the past couple of weeks, especially in pass coverage. But, I haven't seen much of Harris as a pass catcher. But what I know he can do on the ground, I know he's a good rookie, good running back, tough to bring down. So I'll be interested to watch that matchup. The other guy, Alec Overtree, another one they literally signed right off the street. He came in training camp. In his first 4 practices, he had 5 interceptions. So he made an impression right away. And him and Danny Trevathan have kind of played that sub in, sub out on different situations type role where the Bears are going a lot of dime. So they'll take both of them out. And then when they don't go dime, they'll go nickel or their base. They'll sub, Ogletree out for Trevathan or sub Trevathan out for Ogletree. I think Ogletree is a better linebacker right now. If Pittsburgh can get, a tight end or Najee Harris on Alec Ogletree or Danny Trevathan in pass coverage, I think that's an automatic win for them. That's an automatic mismatch. I'd be interested to see if they'll do that early and often.
And when you talk about safety duos out there, Chicago's got some of the best out there in Tashawn Gibson and Eddie Jackson. And, of course, their 2 corners, Jalen Johnson and Kendall Victor. Hope I got his name right. And also they have a former Steeler in the secondary, Ari Burns, so there's a possible revenge game right there. What's your thoughts on the Bears secondary this year, and how do they match against a Steelers receiver unit that, has honestly fared pretty well in the last few weeks? You can't really complain.
Yeah, Johnson is probably the one guy that scares me back there for the Steelers wide receivers. I think he's a mismatch for almost anyone back there. I've watched a little bit of Claypool. I think Jalen Johnson's probably going to shadow Claypool a little more than we'd expect. But there's going to be a mismatch. The Bears, they've really struggled in that secondary. Whether it's Duke Shelley in the nickel, Kendall Vilder back there, the number 2, they've kind of had to throw these late round picks in there to kind of, put a Band-Aid on their secondary, and they haven't been awful. They haven't really stood out. The only one that's really stood out has been Jalen Johnson. And up until the last 2 or 3 weeks before he had to go against Devontae Adams, he was playing at a Pro Bowl level, one of the best man cover corners in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. And then went up against Devontae Adams. He held him to like 72, 82 yards, a couple of receptions, but he got beat badly in a couple of routes. Johnson's the guy I'd watch, in terms of the Bears. I think Pittsburgh is going to try to go away from him. I think Ben and the Steelers offense, their minds are smarter, and they'll know, look, we can't really go Jalen Johnson's way. Let's try to expose the other matchup. Let's try to get, Johnson and Duke Shelley or Johnson and Kendall Vilder. Maybe we'll move Claypool around a little bit, stuff like that. It's going to be tough because it's going to depend on if Eddie Jackson plays. He didn't practice today. He's dealing with a hamstring. If he doesn't play in this game, it could get ugly for the Bears secondary in terms of the Steelers passing attack.
And how's Ari Burns been doing?
Ari Burns, I believe, hasn't gotten much reps. I can't remember if he's on IR or not. I'm looking it up right now. I don't think he's appeared in any. He has not started any games. He's pretty much just played mostly special teams. He kind of fell behind. He was in that competition for the outside job opposite of Jalen Johnson, and just kind of fell behind there. They gave it to Kendall Vilder, the rookie. I don't know why, but Burns really didn't stand out much, and I believe he's only played. I don't even know if he's played one single snap yet on defense. Mostly it's been special teams so far.
So Zach, who do you think will have a big game for the Bears, and what's your biggest concern for this game?
Yeah, man, the biggest concern I'll answer first I think it's the offensive line. And I think Justin Fields is talented enough where in the future, he can make up for a lack of talent around him. Right now, he's not at that. He's a rookie still. He's still trying to figure out how it's going in the NFL, the game speed, all that. The offensive line is not good. And when you're facing a pass rush like this and you're facing a defense like this, that spells trouble. That's my biggest worry. If we're talking about this game, let's say in 4 more years when they play again at Soldier Field and we do this, I would think if the Bears had a bad offensive line, Justin Fields would be at that stage where he's good enough to, elevate the guys around him, and I wouldn't worry about it. Looking at a guy that stands out, that's a good one. I think I'm going to look at I'll go Darnell Mooney because I think he's been their best wide receiver by far. He's a guy that is ready to break out. We've seen a couple big games from him, but it just hasn't been consistent. And if they want to win, they're going to need someone, either Darnell Mooney or Allen Robinson, to have a big game. I'm talking like 8-9 receptions, 130, 140 yards, a couple touchdowns. I think that's the only way this offense gets going and wins on Monday night.
All right. Could you give us a prediction?
Yeah. The Steelers are going to win. I'm going to say, Heinz Field's such a tough place to play. Monday Night Football. I think it's going to be something like 27, Pittsburgh 27. I think Chicago's 16, but I don't think it's going to be as close as that all game. I think the Bears will get a late touchdown at the end, garbage time touchdown. I think Pittsburgh's going to win by double digits.
Real quick, I want to ask this question. The Steelers recently acquired Anthony Miller, a former first-round pick from Chicago. And I'm just wondering, can you give us a little bit of a scouting report on Miller? Because there's been a lot of promise with him, but of course, when being a former first-round pick, something went wrong.
Yeah, so the main thing with Anthony Miller was all the talent in the world, flashed it right away. 7-8 touchdowns his rookie season, fantastic. He just never could put it together consistently, and I think he kind of got into his own head a little bit. If you remember last year in the playoff game against the Saints, he punched Chauncey Gardner-Johnson from New Orleans in a pivotal moment in that game. The Bears were still in that game, and he committed the foul. And what kind of stood out to me was after that game, Matt Nagy said, we took time, because teams are only allowed so much time to meet with players in meetings and stuff. We took significant time in pointing out that this defensive back's going to do this. He's done it twice already in the last 2 years. He's going to do it again. He's going to get in your head. Do not react. Do not do anything. And Anthony Miller still reacted and still punched him in the helmet. And Javon Wims did it in the regular season game against them. And Miller and Cohen and all those guys were going at it in the year before. So the potential's there. I just think he's got to get out of his own head, put it together, string it together. You'll see. I mean, he's had games where, he'll catch 7-8 passes, 82, 90, 100 yards, a couple touchdowns. And the next week, he'll follow it up with 1 reception for 13 yards. Not very consistent. I think it was 2019. If you look at his 2019 stats, the second half is amazing. I mean, you put up the second half with some of the best wide receivers in the league in that 2019 season. He's right up there. And that's what everyone thought. He had promise going into 2020. It's kind of just all fell apart for him. I hope he does well. He's always been a nice guy to talk to, a nice guy to interview. But yeah, man, he's just got to put it together physically and up here as well.
All right. What about the Bears Stadium situation and the possibility to move to Arlington Park? And also, I want to get a second, man. How does the fans view the McClaskey family at this time?
Frustration. To answer the second part of it, very frustrated. The Bears never fire coaches in season, and I think a lot of fans are fed up and ready to move on with a new era. And they deserve some of the blame, yes. But it's just not going to happen. They're not going to move on from a coach. The Steelers would have to absolutely destroy the Bears and embarrass them on Monday night for something to happen out of the bye week. I would say the frustration is the main key. In terms of Arlington, it looks like they're going, and they should go because they don't make any money from Soldier Field at all. They actually pay to play there. They make no money from parking, any of that stuff. It just makes all the sense in the world to move out. And the way they're talking is giant stadium, state of the art. One of these big stadiums we've seen so far, in Minneapolis, in Atlanta, in Los Angeles, in Dallas, something kind of like that, I'd say. There's so much room out there. They can do anything they want out there. They can have multiple parking lots, hotels, food, a Hall of Fame, a stadium. They can host Super Bowls if it's indoor. They can host the Final Four. They can host a Big Ten title game. They can host World Cup games. That's all stuff they literally cannot do right now in Soldier Field because it's too small. So I think it's going to happen. I'd be shocked if it didn't, and I think it's going to happen sooner than later.
That Chicagoland area, there's like 50 million arenas out there. I think of Wintrust, the former Sears Center. Then you got United, Rosemont, Horizon, now known as the Allstate Center. And then the Chicago, there was like another like Chicago like stadium. I can't remember it, but it's like a high school gym for wrestling events, which is insane because it seems like they just pop out of thin air out there in Chicago.
Yeah, there's a lot of room out there in the suburbs. And the property they're actually looking at is huge. I mean, there's a metro train that goes there. There's a highway literally 5-10 minutes off. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever been to Soldier Field. It is a pain to get to. And you're walking a lot. If you drive, you're sitting in traffic for a long time. It's just a pain. I love the history there. I love the old stadium. Fun fact, the old stadium was actually bigger than the new stadium. The old stadium seated more people than this new stadium, which is insane to me why they did that. But
they took away the pillars. They took away the pillars, which were so amazing, and they had them go up to like the University of Illinois. And you're just like, I'll just stay there, man.
Yeah, I don't know what they botched that whole thing. It's unfortunate, but it's not a friendly, like it's not, fan friendly to get you in terms of transportation. There's, there's food around there in some areas, but like you have to walk through the park. You have to go down the road, stuff like that. They could do so much more in Arlington Heights. It just makes all the sense. And especially with how betting and gambling is going in the NFL, I'd be 100% shocked if they didn't take advantage of it.
And surprisingly, Mike Tomlin was 0-3 in his career against the Bears. The Steelers haven't beat the Bears since 2005, which was the game where Jerome Bettis ran over Brian Urlacher for a touchdown in the snow at Heinz Field. However, the Steelers have won 19 straight games at home on Monday Night Football, last losing in 1991 to the Giants. So a record will be broken on Monday night either way, unless there's a tie and Tomlin remains winless against Chicago. So I thought that was it. Are they talking about that in the Bears media a lot about Tomlin's 0-3 record against the Bears?
Not a lot. Matt Nagel's actually asked about Tomlin today, and he just said, he's a guy that, I look up to. He's a guy that's always does it right. Someone that you can learn from. And he actually had an interesting note. He said he's, I think it was at an owners meeting or something. He's like, I got the chance to pick Tomlin's brain, and I did. I spent as much time as I could with him. And those stats don't surprise me. The other one that I saw was crazy too. I think he's like Tomlin's like 24-4 against rookie quarterbacks in his career, which is wild. I think Prescott and Carson Wentz are the only ones that the last ones that got wins. I think Brandon Weeden had a win against him, which is random as hell. I never would have thought him. I thought like Baker or someone else would have from Cleveland would have got him, but not Brandon Weeden. So it'll be his history's not on Justin Fields' side come Monday nights.
And think about this: the quarterback of record in that loss, a young Kyle Orton, who I thought should have been the future starter of the Bears from that point out. They went back to Rex for some reason. They made it to the Super Bowl the next year, but I always felt that Orton was the better quarterback.
And I remember watching that game, and I think the Bears defense played really well up until that moment where like Bettis kind of went over Urlacher and kind of fell apart. But I'll say this, from that point on, that kind of felt like a turning point for Chicago's defense in terms of setting up their next season and the run they went to the Super Bowl. Because that Steelers team was really good. And that was kind of one of their first, okay, we're going to face a really good offense here on the road. It was like, I think it was like a 4:05, Eastern time start or something like that. It was a primetime, Fox game. And that kind of set the tone the next year for the Bears because they just came out and absolutely dominated in 2006. And that defense was just nasty. But I remember watching that Steelers game. The weird one for me, the one that kind of stood out for me in the Bears Steelers was the two Cutler ones, I don't know how the 2009 and then the one on Sunday Night Football with under Mark Trestman, that was just such a weird year for the Bears. It would have been 2013 because they were really good. They had arguably one of the better offenses in the league. They had one of the worst defenses in the league. I have no idea how they won that game on the road. And the 2017 one with Mike Glennon starting at quarterback, I don't know how they won that one either, but for some reason, Chicago finds ways to beat Pittsburgh. I have no idea how. Don't ask me. If only we could get some of that luck to beating Green Bay, because we've just been god awful. We're like 4-28 in our last 32 meetings against Green Bay. But yeah, I wish we had the reverse fortune there.
And Zach, did you
Devin
cover
Hester?
that?
I'm sorry.
Zach,
Devin Hester turned 39 today. Do you think he should be a Hall of Famer? I think he's a Hall of Famer.
Yes.
But it's always going to be tough with special teams, kickoff return. Nobody's ever done it. If Brian Mitchell hasn't done it, I don't know how he is not a Hall of Famer.
I think he should. I look at when you literally change the rules when a guy plays, that should tell you something. And, I got to see Devin Hester play every single week, and I still don't know how he did some of those returns. I mean, the guy didn't even need, 3 yards. I mean, you gave him a yard of space and he was gone. I mean, it was just, you weren't going to catch him. I don't think he'll be first ballot, just because like what you're saying, like it's very hard for special teams. I think this is a guy that could change the process of how voting, how people look at voting, and he'll have a really good representation in that room when it comes time. The guy that's probably going to pound the table for him is Dan Pompei here in Chicago, who's a fantastic writer for The Athletic. He pretty much is the sole reason why Brian Urlacher is first ballot on the last couple of classes of the Hall of Fame have just been insane. And you look at the Brian Urlacher class, like I think it was Ray Lewis, Brian Urlacher, I think was it Randy
Moss?
Yeah, that is an insane Brian Dawkins. That's a crazy class. And for Brian Urlacher to be first ballot, Dan Pompei did a fantastic job, and I think he'll do another good job. I don't think Hester will be first ballot, but Hester was a guy. I look at it this way: if a guy, usually during the game, I'll get up and get some stuff, get some water stuff. You never left when Devin Hester, when the ball was getting kicked off, you were glued to the damn TV, because even if it was a 10-yard return, he would run 20, 30 yards and try to make the most out of those 10 yards, essentially.
And Zach, did you cover the last Steelers-Bears game there in Chicago in 2017?
I was a member of the media. I did not actually cover that game. I had to be at something. I cannot remember.
Okay.
I was a member of the media, and I did not cover that. That was the only game I did not cover that year. And that was third game of the season.
It was the third game, and that was when everything was going on with the kneeling and everything like that.
Yeah, that's right.
That was probably maybe, I'm not making excuses for the Steelers, but a lot was going on in that locker room between that 2017, 2018.
Yeah. Who was the guy that stood out in the, I remember the guy
Villanueva.
Yes, that's what it was. Yes. Yeah, I did not cover that game, but I was a member of the media, and that was, the third game, and it was Mike Glennon, and then 2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, Mitch Trubisky made his first start on Monday Night Football.
And actually, I'm going to ask about Kevin White, because actually he grew up in the same town I did in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I played football with him, like Little League. I knew his brother a little bit better, Karan, and Kazir is actually the youngest ones with the Chargers right now. They all ended up going playing at West Virginia. But I see Bears fans on Twitter all the time. They get on Kevin White, especially like Big Cat and stuff. And he's with the Saints now, and I heard he had a catch like last week or something. But what happened there with when they took Kevin White in the first round, and it ended up not working?
Yeah, just unfortunate because he got hurt. The guy had a lot of talent, super nice guy, and you almost had to feel bad for him because you knew like those last couple of years, it was like, this is it. Like he's got to do something. Yeah, man, the talent was there, just the shin injury that he had and then the setback he had. And I felt bad for him because I could tell like the guy, like, he got a lot of hate. Like people were, it's a waste. It's not his fault. It's not Mitch Trubisky's fault that he was taken ahead of Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. It's not Kevin White's fault. He was taken that early. He just I mean, when you have an injury like that, and a leg injury, it's not easy to return. So, yeah, I saw you had a catch the other day for the Saints. So I'm rooting for him. Nice guy, but yeah, it just didn't work out and gets a lot of hate that he shouldn't get at all.
All right, guys. So now, what are your predictions? So this is going to be, of course, one of those potential Tomlin specials. All of a sudden, with how the second half of the season looks mighty tasty for the Steelers right now. But Chris, I want to get the Vegas mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, according to OddsShark, the Steelers are 6.5-point favorites against the Bears, and the over/under is 40 points. The Bears are 3-7 against the spread in their last 10 games, and the total has gone under in 6 of Chicago's last 7 games. And the Bears are 9-1 straight up in their last 10 games against an opponent in the AFC North.
All right, so of course this is kind of like the prime Tomlin special territory. 0-3 against the Bears, big victory against the Browns, but still, I think this is going to be the time in which the Steelers finally get that victory against the Bears under Tomlin. I'm going to say 24-13 Steelers.
I think the Steelers win this one. I know the last 2 weeks I've picked against them, but I think that everything lines up for them well in this game and against Detroit next week. I think they should be 6-3 heading into Week 10 against the Chargers, and I have the Steelers winning. I want to say 28-17. I'll say they win by 11 points.
I have the Steelers winning 28-10.
Oh, wow. Big boy.
28-10. Fields is going to turn the ball over at least 3 times. He'll get sacked at least 3 times. And I'm mad that I don't have their special teams defense on fantasy. I'm upset.
Hey, it could be worse, but that's a big score on your part. I will say that. So you have a lot of confidence on the Steelers' offense and maybe defense also picking up some points. So I'm going to say this seems like the prime game for Minkah Fitzpatrick to really get himself back under the good graces of most of Steelers Nation. So I'm going to say that Minkah Fitzpatrick gets an interception, and he also recovers a fumble.
I'm going to say Freiermuth. I think he's going to continue on his streak of the last 2 games. He played really well. I think he's going to continue to make some plays over the middle.
We talked about our guest talked about how the line's going to struggle. It's easy to say that. I think it's going to be a 2-sack game for Cameron Hayward and a 2-sack game, at least a sack for all 3 of the Steelers starting line: Bugs, Worley, and Hayward.
Wow, that's a ton of confidence. You got any thoughts on the now the third outside linebacker as well in Taco Charlton?
He might get a sack too. If he performs with a rookie quarterback in a bad line against a good front 7, that does not sound like our guest has confidence. And why should I? And he's a Bears homer. He knows more information about that unit than we do.
Yeah, and look for, like you mentioned, Hayward should have a big. I mean, he's having like a career year right now. Pro Football Focus, rates him real high. They had him on their midseason All-Pro list. I think he should have a field day as well.
All right, let's do over 100. How many sacks do you think the Steelers could get this week?
This game?
This game.
I think they could get like 5 at least.
I think the over-under is 3. The over-under should be 3, and I'm going to say it's going to be over. I'm probably going to say probably 4. But in terms of this, Brandon, so you're basically going Oprah Winfrey with the sacks. It's fitting, being that Oprah used to record her show out in Chicago.
You get a sack, and you get a sack, and you get a sack, and you get an interception, Minkah. And this is going to be like this for the next couple of weeks. Unless You see, the special thing about the Tomlin special, Ty, is you can't predict it. It just happens, don't it, Chris?
They really do.
You can't predict it.
They come out of nowhere, and
they come out of nowhere.
I already saw Tone Diggs there on the Pat McAfee show. He tweeted out how he tweeted a picture of the Steelers versus Lions game, and he was saying this game worries me already.
Oh my God!
Like,
wow, this is how traumatized this fan base is. This is how traumatized this fan base is. It's like a preacher. It's like it hits all the time. It hits at the right time. That's what you're saying right now about the Tomlin special. It's going to hit when you least expect it. It's going to be like an RKO. It's going to be like the power game. It consumes all, basically, with this town. They're so worried about Tomlin special. Here goes the thing. If you keep on talking about it, that's when it's going to happen. Why don't you just not talk about it? And, maybe, this may be like last year, but then again, technically, I guess any loss would have been a Tomlin special because, 11-0. But I'm just like, guys, just enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride, people. It's a fantastic voyage all the way to Los Angeles, hopefully, for the Steelers. Just calm down. Don't worry. If they lose, let's not proclaim the end of the world like we were thinking earlier this season. It's just like, all right, they lost. I mean, it's gonna happen because I mean, it could be worse. You could have Mike White throw for 400 against you.
Yeah, getting RKO'd is basically the perfect way to describe it.
Yes, an RKO out of nowhere.
Man, you guys are basically just. I guess I'm an eternal optimist. I guess because I'm never putting Tomlin specials out there. But meanwhile, Chris, you were doing it last year, and Brandon, you're continuing the tradition. Bunch of non-believers.
We started it. We actually started it, and now radio stations around the city are coining it. We should be getting money off this, Chris.
Yeah,
for real.
We've been talking about specials for a long time. It feels like,
I'll tell my friends at 102.5 DX and also 93.7 The Fans to send you some royalties.
Yeah, for 10 brands
some royalties for that because they robbed it. I'm not going to mention them because I worked with them in the past, but they know they are.
How do you think they found out about Brandon? You think they were listening to us on our?
Yeah, of course they listen to us. More people listen to us than what you think.
Unless I tweeted it out and they saw it, I don't know.
Because I hardly ever used Twitter until like 3 weeks ago.
That's all for us here on the Renegade Blitz podcast. For Chris Ward and Brandon Walker, I'm Ty Polk. Be sure to check out this game, Monday Night Football on ESPN. And of course, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you for the recap.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at @RBlitzPod, and at Blitz Videos. Read articles on RenegadeBlitz.com. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. The Renegade Blitz podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you can listen to podcasts.